labor and the expression of worth, aligning our efforts with our deepest values. Seek first the depths, and all other things will be added unto you. It is extremely important as we relay personal details of stories and talk about personal feelings that we not get lost in the personal. So what you are witnessing is the creative process in which I am trying to transmute my suffering, to transmute my circumstance into a creative process where I connect with other tribe members. I need to find a relevant place in community. The deepest teachings tell us that suffering does not exist. The gurus, however, who are teaching that are generally wearing robes in some kind of ashram or secluded, cloistered environment. They're not struggling with homelessness. So those of us who are still struggling with the lack of a physical address, we are having to be in a more survival kind of state where it's understandable that the physical realm would seem a little bit more real to us, right? And this is where my vision for tribes has arisen. I guess that would be like some kind of homeless alliance. And now I'm one of the many people who do not have physical addresses. May we find ourselves relevant in our community by way of our deepest labor and expression of worth. An appropriate mental health solution is to be relevant in community. I believe that it is understandable that I may have a stress response sometimes. It is also understandable that I would have to work with hurt feelings. For any of us, right? It's understandable why we sometimes might get our feelings hurt. Living in a world such as this. I remember when I was 14 or 15 years old, striking my guitar violently with my hands, turning up the volume, biting my guitar. I remember biting my guitar strings. It was like Jimi Hendrix taught me to do it. And then also it came in really good as some kind of therapy in a moment when I was really, really angry. I think I'm at this place where I can acknowledge, even just while I'm holding a camera, maybe even as this part of my integrated practice. You know, this relationship with the camera being part of the integrated practice and the communication of these types of things, like the practice being that which helps me through these moments, right? Where it's like when I turn the camera on, I realize I'm going to have to watch this back, so let's do this right. I get hurt sometimes. I feel hurt. There's something in me that seems to be very hurt. And I've been trying to explain that to you, all of you, for quite some time. And I've been asking for help. And this practice, this integrated practice, this holding of the camera right here is part of this practice. And bearing witness to those ones of us who are hurting. I am not the only one who is feeling this great weight I am not the only one who is rocking. It is my understanding that any circumstances which brings up a hurt in us, that circumstance can be seen through. Let me restate that. I am generally not upset for the reason that I think I am. The circumstance is not the problem. All I'm really dealing with is me. It's like my friend Ebb Flow says, the only problem is the stress that you experience, the hormones, he says. This is a stress response you're having, and the problem is not the problem. There's a fear response. There's a hormonal fear response. Ah. Slow-moving river, won't you take us to our home? There are times when I have a physical sense of being crushed. Also, I have these migraine headaches that are accompanied, that have nausea and an inability to focus. And they come in seasons, and they're coming longer now. I am okay with who I am, but I also do not have a physical address, nor can I make an agreement with a full-time employer any longer, or even a part-time employer to say, yes, I will be able to make it to this job, I commit to this, because it just can't work for me. I have pushed myself to my absolute limit in these places of employment. And my boss, Feb, at Roosevelt General Hospital, she handed back to me my resignation. I was just resigning. I just resigned because I just... It's what that song, Eye of the Hurricane, that I've played. Engines losing power, looking for a place to set down. Engines losing power. It's like this, there's this thing that happens. After many years of struggling with a lot of shame surrounding my troubles at work, through a lot of prayer, a lot of devotion, I finally heard this message: drop your nets and follow. Pursue the greatest depth. I went to 2 treatment facilities while I was working at Roosevelt General Hospital and 1 psychiatric unit. I came and left. I took FMLA leave. I would sometimes push myself to the absolute limit where I could no longer care for other people. And then I would have to go into to my boss, Jim at the time, and I have to say, I have to go now. Like when you pushed yourself and pushed yourself and pushed, and then you cannot push yourself any longer, and you're in the bathroom broken down and crying, right? Because you're just trying to gain the focus to see the next patient, right? I loved my job in physical therapy. I loved the people. I do not want the government to support me. I need to find a relevant place in community. I believe this is an appropriate mental health solution, is to be relevant in community. There were a couple of very important messages that I got that came through my ex-wife in the midst of this process. And the messages were this, and I mention them because they're so important to the work of labor and the expression of worth. And I'll tell you why in a minute. Number 1 was, get the fuck back to work or get the fuck on down the road. And number 2 was, you have 2 choices, work or the hospital. When I have gone to churches to seek spiritual guidance and help, I have almost immediately been told that I need to go get a job before people even know anything about my life. I was told by one man, you don't work, you don't eat. Understood. There is this thing about humans, we want things to be fair and we want people to pull their own weight, and I certainly do understand that. And as I have described before, I have completely exhausted myself in a number of work forms, paid work forms. As a young man of 22 years old, I was already experiencing a heavy dissolution of the ego, or I should say that my ego was in full force and I was in deep suffering. The deeper awakening and the spiritual education that I've experienced over my adult life since then have led me to even greater convictions. I find now that when I am devoting myself to what I know to be true, to what I know to be deepest about myself, when I am devoting myself to my truest and deepest gifts, that I am well in this world and I am communicating love, light, and joy to others. I speak often of my practice. My practice is the form, it is the raft that keeps me afloat today, and it is why it is so important, and that is why I devote my attention and time to it. Labor and the expression of worth is a philosophical context in which many practices may coexist, in which we may share practices together.